for Tim McCoy.
Well, the mailman keeps bringing more requests from you people, questions you want answered. Always remember this, don't hesitate to write me because I'll always be glad to answer over this program any of the questions that I possibly can for you. If I haven't got the information, maybe I'll dig it up. But 2 years of study and research, why, most of these things are pretty close at hand. Now, here's one, for instance, of a girl who wants to know about... Now here, did Pocahontas ever marry Captain John Smith? How did she die and where? Well, I suppose that confuses a lot of youngsters because I know that very often they get the impression that Pocahontas married John Smith, that she was his wife, and that she lived her life there in Jamestown. Of course, to begin with, here's Jamestown. And that was the colony that Captain John Smith operated from. Powhatan with his Indians, Pocahontas, his daughter. Now, the funny thing about Pocahontas is that when we read that legend of her saving the life of Captain John Smith, there are certain versions of it. Some people say that it never happened, that John Smith made it up himself, wrote it, sounded like a perfectly good romance, so it was accepted. Others say that, of course, it could have happened. Smith was taken a prisoner, and it was only normal for a girl like that, who was the daughter of a powerful chief, to say, why kill this man? Save him. Make him my slave. Save him for me, Papa. It was that sort of thing, you see. You must remember this also, that at the time this is supposed to have happened, which must have been 1608, about a year after the colony was founded, Pocahontas was only a girl of 13 or 14 years of age. But there's no question about Pocahontas being a great influence with the Indians for the people in the colony of Jamestown. She helped them immeasurably, did a world of things, even warned them sometimes when the Indians were plotting against them. With the result that she came into Jamestown, did accept Christianity, learned to speak English, and did not marry Captain John Smith, but married a man by the name of John Rolfe. Now, after she and Rolfe were married, they made a trip over to England. She was accepted at court, was shown all the deference in the world. They did everything they could for this Indian princess. You might say there's the first of the Indian princess. Now, they were over in England, being entertained in London. They start back for America. Now, this brings us up to 1617. She'd only been married 3 years, so you see she would be around 20 years of age by the time she married John Rolfe. They had taken ship in London, started down the Thames, but along the journey, an epidemic broke out aboard ship. The ship was put in quarantine at a place called Gravesend. Pocahontas was taken ashore, and there she died in John Rolfe's arms. She was buried there in the little churchyard, and Gravesend became the end of the trail for our first Indian princess, Pocahontas. Well, let's see what else we have here now. There are other letters. Oh, here's one from a boy in Spokane, Washington. Was there any such thing as a Hudson Bay Musket that was traded to the Indians for furs? Can you give us any information regarding this gun and what was its origin? Oh, yes, of course there was a Hudson Bay Musket. Just as we have trade names for a lot of our guns, those guns were made particularly for the Hudson's Bay Company to be used in trade with the Indians. There were certain markings. Wait a minute, I've got one of them. I'll show you. Now, here is an original Hudson Bay musket. This is an old flintlock. And the Hudson's Bay Company was very particular about having the right kind of goods go to the Indians. So with these muskets, they put on that particular mark, which is a Chinese dragon done in brass. It got so the Indians wouldn't trade for any other kind of a musket. Then when the American fur traders got into the game, they ran up against these muskets and they decided they'd do something about it. And this is what they did, some of our good old Yankee traders. They took one of those Hudson's Bay guns down to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where the good locksmiths and good gunsmiths were. They had it copied. And they had a very, very near copy of that same Chinese dragon, enough to fool an Indian anyway. They copied the gun, lock, stock, and barrel, and used that in trade against the Hudson's Bay Company and the Northwest Fur Company and the others in trading with the Indians. They put practically tubing in here for barrels, not good solid steel barrels, but they were just so much tubing. And I imagine many an Indian put an extra charge of powder in there sometime and had it blow up in his face. But here's the cute trick those traders did. You see, here's the Hudson's Bay gun, the height of it. Now, when they traded that to an Indian, they stood the gun upright in that position. Then they made the Indian pile up furs until it reached the end of the muzzle. And that was the price of the gun. So when our good old Yankee traders got into the game, when they had that Lancaster gun made, look at the difference. There's the length of the barrel. So the Indian now had to pile up furs from that height clear up to there. Shrewd traders, those fellows. Now that, I think, is the story of your Hudson Bay trade musket. Well, now, I've got time for some more here. Now, Captain John Smith, Pocahontas. Yes, here's one. Some time ago, I read of a big Indian attack, and the soldiers used wagons covered with boilerplate as a fort. Where and when did that happen? Well, they're pretty close on that. There's only one thing about it. People have supposed that in that wagon box fight, that's what it was called, that they did have wagon boxes covered with boilerplate. But from all I've been able to learn, talking with people who were there, I knew some of the old-timers. I just sort of lapped over like that, and when I was very young, I got acquainted with a few of those old-timers who had been in that country at that time. And they said that that was not true, that there was no boilerplate on those wagon boxes. They were just ordinary, big old wagon boxes issued by the Quartermaster Corps. Now, where that happened was up here in Wyoming on the Powder River, near old Fort Phil Kearny. Now, I think I've talked to you before about the Thieves Road, the road that the government wanted to buy from the Indians up across Wyoming that became the Bozeman Trail. Red Cloud refused to sell, and the Sioux went on the warpath. And when the government built a string of forts across that road anyway, the Indians said, they've come to treat with us to buy this road. But before we can say yes or no, they established their forts. They've stolen it. It's the Thieves Road. And they took to the warpath. Of course, they laid siege to Fort Phil Kearny, destroyed any number of the garrison, because what they would have to do is send wood trains out to get timber to bring back for their building and for the necessary wood to keep them warm in the wintertime. And these men were all equipped with the latest model Springfield rifle, carbine and rifle. What they did when they sent the wood trains out there to Piney Island was to take the wagons, draw them up into a circle like this, then unload the wagon boxes, just as, here, I'll show you on this model wagon. The box would come off the wagon, you see, leaving the running gears, and then these running gears would be used to load the logs and the wood on. But they took those wagon boxes and put them in the same circle, piled all the baggage in there, put their extra arms and ammunition, and were ready for any kind of an attack. Red Cloud attacked that wagon train, that wood train, with 3,000 warriors. The men came down, got in these wagon boxes. They bored loopholes in there with augers. They had any number of these new rifles, these Springfields. They had extra rifles, they had extra ammunition, and the fellows who were not good shots were put to loading them for the men who were. There was one old-timer, one old frontiersman that they allocated 8 guns to. And here was the gun, and here's what fooled them, you see. Here's the Springfield. They'd been used to muzzle loaders, where a man fired a shot, then they could wait until he loaded again. In the meantime, they'd attack. But this gun is a new trap door, flipped up, flipped down, and the shell was in there again, and it was that fast. The fire from that fort was so hard and so fast, the Indians couldn't withstand it. They sent charge after charge against it, and every time they did, it was like attacking a sheet of flame. They just mowed those Indians down. Red Cloud said afterward that he lost the flower of his young warriors that day. Over 1,000 Indians were wounded or killed. And of the white men, they lost 1 officer and 1 private, killed and 2 wounded. 31 men stood off 3,000 Indians all day. Fought them off until the Indians finally dispersed when reinforcements came. General Dodge afterwards, in talking to some of those men about that attack, said, talking about this rapidity of fire, he spoke to this one old frontiersman that had the 8 guns there, and he said, how many Indians do you think you killed? Well, sir, he said, I don't know, but gin a good solid rest, I can hit $1 at 50 yards every time. And I saw more than 50 of them varmints over the sights of my gun inside of 50 yards. Well, he said, good heavens, how did you keep up such fire? Well, General, he said, I don't know, but I kept 8 guns pretty well het up there for more than 3 hours. And that was the story of the wagon box fight.
Join us for another authentic story of the West when we again meet America's favorite Western storyteller, Tim McCoy.